Empathy, at first glance, seems so intrinsic to human experience that it almost feels self-explanatory, a natural ability to sense what another person is going through. Yet beneath this apparent simplicity lies a phenomenon that is deeply nuanced and shaped by a rich historical and scientific context. To truly understand empathy, it helps to distinguish it from related concepts like sympathy and compassion. Each describes a way of relating to others, but their differences are crucial, especially for grasping the biological roots and social significance of empathy itself. Sympathy, for instance, is often used interchangeably with empathy in everyday conversation, but the two refer to distinct experiences. Sympathy involves feeling concern or sorrow for someone else's situation, such as hearing about a friend's loss and offering heartfelt condolences. This is an emotional response, but it differs fundamentally from empathy, which is not just about recognizing another's suffering, but about actually sharing in that experience, emotionally or intellectually. Sympathy maintains a certain distance. One stands outside the other's feelings, observing and reacting. Empathy, by contrast, is the act of stepping into another's shoes, feeling with them rather than for them. This subtle but important distinction shapes how we connect with others in moments of joy, distress, or uncertainty. Compassion adds another dimension. It is often described as a blend of sympathy and empathy, coupled with a desire to help. Compassion is characterized by warmth and care, moving beyond simply sharing or understanding suffering to actively reaching out with kindness and support. Unlike empathy, which can sometimes overwhelm by mirroring another's pain, compassion is marked by the intention to alleviate that pain. The interplay among these capacities, sympathy, empathy, and compassion, forms the emotional scaffolding of human relationships and community life. Tracing the origins of the term empathy sheds light on how our understanding of the phenomenon has evolved. The word entered English in the early 20th century, borrowed from the German Einfühlung, which originally described the experience of projecting oneself emotionally into a work of art. Over time, empathy's meaning shifted from this aesthetic context to interpersonal encounters, becoming central to the way psychologists and philosophers explained our ability to relate to one another. This conceptual migration is more than a linguistic curiosity. It signals the growing recognition of empathy's importance for social life, moral reasoning, and therapeutic practice. Figures like Carl Rogers and Heinz Kohut, working in psychotherapy, helped shape the modern view of empathy as a cornerstone of psychological healing and healthy relationships. Empathy resists easy definition, however. Scholars have noted persistent conceptual confusion, debating whether empathy is primarily an emotional process, a cognitive ability, or some combination of the two. In recent years, consensus has begun to form around the idea that empathy contains both affective and cognitive components. The affective part is the visceral, emotional resonance, feeling distress at another's sadness, for instance, or sharing in someone's excitement. The cognitive part involves perspective-taking, the conscious effort to imagine another's thoughts, beliefs, or experiences. This dual nature helps explain empathy's flexibility. Sometimes, empathy is an almost automatic reaction, a flash of shared feeling. Other times, it requires deliberate effort to understand what someone else is going through, especially when their background or circumstances differ from our own. The social value of empathy is profound. It is a form of social cognition, essential for building and sustaining relationships. Through empathy, people connect across divides, navigate conflicts, and foster understanding in both intimate and societal contexts. The ability to empathize does more than smooth social interactions. It underpins pro-social behaviors, encouraging acts of kindness, fairness, and cooperation. In palliative care, for example, patients often distinguish between sympathy, which can feel patronizing or distant, and empathy, which fosters a sense of being truly understood and accompanied in one's suffering. When compassion is present, it transforms this connection into supportive action. Empathy's significance extends beyond everyday acts of kindness. Psychologists and philosophers consider it central to moral agency, the capacity to make ethical decisions that account for others' needs and perspectives. Empathy shapes not only how we treat those close to us, but also how we respond to strangers, communities, and even people from the distant past. The concept of historical empathy, for example, involves both emotional and cognitive engagement with people who lived in different times, allowing us to understand their decisions and challenges within their unique contexts. This ability to bridge temporal and cultural gaps is part of what makes empathy so vital to both individual and collective flourishing. Despite its importance, empathy is not a fixed quality. Evidence suggests that empathy can fluctuate over time and be influenced by cultural, social, and even biological factors. It develops throughout childhood, shaped by early relationships and experiences. The erosion of empathy in certain modern contexts, whether due to technological distractions, social fragmentation, or other pressures, has raised concerns among researchers about the consequences for mental and physical health, as well as for the health of society as a whole. Understanding empathy as a biological phenomenon means recognizing that it is not just a matter of philosophy or culture, but is rooted in the workings of the brain and body. While the specifics of these biological underpinnings will be explored in depth later, it is already clear that empathy is more than a fleeting feeling or a superficial social nicety. It is a fundamental part of what it means to be human, a capability that enables us to form deep connections, support one another in times of need, and build the moral and social fabric of our communities. As we continue this exploration, the question is not simply what empathy is, but why it matters, how it shapes our lives, our choices, and our societies. The distinction between empathy, sympathy, and compassion is more than semantic. It is the key to understanding how humans relate to each other and how, at the most basic level, we are wired to connect. This foundation will guide our journey into the biology of empathy, where the science behind our most humane instincts comes into focus. Peering into the living brain, scientists have begun to unravel the intricate web of circuits that allow us to sense and share the experiences of others. The roots of empathy are not hidden in mystical abstractions, but are anchored in the biology of our neural architecture. This chapter invites you to journey through the biological landscape of empathy, an exploration that reveals how distinct yet interconnected regions of the brain work together to generate both the immediate resonance of another's feelings and the more effortful act of understanding their point of view. At the foundation of this neural dance is the mirror neuron system, a discovery that has profoundly shaped scientific thinking about empathy and social cognition. Mirror neurons, first identified in the brains of monkeys and later found in humans, are remarkable for their dual responsiveness. They fire both when an individual performs an action and when they observe the same action performed by someone else. This mirroring principle extends beyond movement alone. Evidence suggests that observing another's emotional state can activate similar neural circuits in our own brains, a process that may underlie emotional contagion. When we see someone wince in pain or smile in joy, the mirror neuron system helps us automatically echo a version of their internal state, an essential step in feeling with another. Mirror neurons are distributed across several brain regions, including the inferior frontal gyrus and the inferior parietal lobule. Their activation is not limited to simple imitation. Instead, these neurons provide the scaffolding for more complex abilities such as inferring intentions, learning by observation, and, crucially, empathizing with others. Some researchers propose that the mirror neuron system forms a bridge between our own experiences and those of others, supporting a form of social understanding that operates at a pre-reflective level. When an infant instinctively mimics a caregiver's expression, or when adults unconsciously synchronize their body language in conversation, mirror neurons may be silently at work. Yet empathy is more than reflexive resonance. Our capacity to understand and share another's feelings relies on a dynamic interplay between bottom-up and top-down neural processes. Bottom-up pathways, heavily dependent on the mirror neuron system, provide the foundation for affective empathy, our immediate, automatic responses to others' emotions. These responses are deeply rooted in evolution, facilitating social learning and group cohesion. However, humans are also adept at higher-order perspective-taking, or cognitive empathy, which involves stepping outside ourselves to imagine another's thoughts, beliefs, and experiences. This ability draws on top-down neural processes that recruit additional brain regions, notably within the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex, especially its medial and dorsolateral aspects, is known for its role in executive functions such as planning, decision-making, and self-control. In the context of empathy, this region serves as a mental workspace, enabling us to suppress our own immediate reactions and simulate the internal worlds of others. The prefrontal cortex works in concert with the mirror neuron system, integrating raw emotional signals with more abstract reasoning. This collaboration allows us not only to catch another's mood, but to reflect on it, analyze it, and respond in nuanced ways. For example, when trying to understand why a friend is upset by an event that does not disturb us, the prefrontal cortex helps us temporarily set aside our own perspective and inhabit theirs. Emotional engagement with others would be incomplete without the involvement of the limbic system, the brain's network for processing affect. The limbic system includes structures such as the amygdala, insula, and anterior cingulate cortex, each playing a specific role in the tapestry of empathy. The amygdala is particularly important for detecting emotional salience, rapidly flagging cues that signal distress, fear, or pleasure in others. The insula is associated with the internal perception of bodily states, which may explain why witnessing another's pain can sometimes produce a visceral, gut-level reaction in ourselves. The anterior cingulate cortex is implicated in motivation and the regulation of emotional responses, allowing us to translate shared feelings into appropriate social behaviors. Recent research has begun to distinguish the brain regions that support emotional empathy from those underlying cognitive empathy. While both forms of empathy depend on shared neural circuits, they also rely on distinct anatomical substrates. Emotional empathy, which is more automatic and visceral, is strongly linked to areas such as the anterior insula and the anterior cingulate cortex. These regions are activated when we witness someone's suffering or joy and experience a direct emotional echo. Cognitive empathy, in contrast, depends more heavily on the medial prefrontal cortex, the temporal parietal junction, and the right supramarginal gyrus. These structures support mentalizing, the process of constructing an internal model of another person's beliefs, intentions, and emotions. The integration of these neural systems is vital. Empathy is not a single monolithic process, but a relay that weaves together automatic, emotionally charged responses with deliberate, reflective thought. In daily life, our empathetic reactions can range from spontaneous and unbidden to carefully constructed and context-sensitive. The degree to which we experience and express empathy is shaped by the interplay of these neural pathways, as well as by individual differences. Morphological variations in key brain regions have been linked to differences in people's capacity for empathy and compassion. For instance, studies have found that structural changes in the right supramarginal gyrus and other regions are associated with variations in empathic ability. The biological underpinnings of empathy also have significant implications for mental health. Disruptions in the mirror neuron system, limbic structures, or prefrontal networks have been observed in certain neuropsychiatric conditions, such as autism spectrum disorders. In these cases, difficulties in sharing or understanding others' emotions may arise from atypical neural connectivity or function. Conversely, evidence suggests that the neural mechanisms involved in empathy can be shaped and enhanced through experience and training, opening the door to interventions that foster greater compassion and social understanding. While many questions remain about the precise mechanisms and developmental trajectories of these neural systems, what is clear is that empathy is deeply anchored in the architecture of the human brain. It is neither a simple reflex nor a cold calculation, but a symphony of neural processes that allows us to resonate with, understand, and ultimately connect to one another. As research continues, scientists hope to further disentangle the complex wiring that makes empathy possible, a pursuit that promises not only to illuminate the workings of the mind, but also to help cultivate a more understanding and compassionate society. Imagine, for a moment, witnessing a friend in tears, her distress so palpable it tugs at something deep within you. You feel a ripple of her pain, perhaps even an urge to reach out and comfort her. This almost automatic response, this sense of connection and shared feeling, is not simply a product of your upbringing or culture. It is also orchestrated by an intricate dance of chemical messengers and genetic instructions within your body, shaping the very way you relate to others. The biology of empathy is a story of molecules and inherited blueprints, a subtle choreography that unfolds each time we sense and respond to another's emotions. At the heart of this process are neurotransmitters, tiny chemical messengers that leap across synapses to transmit signals between nerve cells. Without them, our emotional and cognitive worlds would be silent. Among the most closely studied in the context of empathy is oxytocin, often called the bonding hormone. Research has shown that oxytocin plays a crucial role in social behaviors, from parental care to trust and cooperation. Its influence on empathy is especially striking. When oxytocin levels rise, people tend to show heightened sensitivity to others' emotional states. Studies reveal that oxytocin can enhance emotional empathy, the raw ability to feel what another person feels, by modulating activity in regions like the amygdala and the anterior insula, areas already known for their involvement in emotional processing. In laboratory settings, participants who receive oxytocin display stronger resonance with the emotions of others, whether it is embarrassment, pain, or joy. Oxytocin's effects do not occur in isolation. It interacts with other neurotransmitter systems, particularly dopamine, which is central to reward and motivation. This interplay appears to underlie the positive feelings that can follow acts of kindness. When we engage in compassionate behavior, our brains release not just oxytocin, but also dopamine and serotonin. This neurochemical blend does not simply reinforce social bonding, it creates a sense of well-being, making empathy and pro-social action intrinsically rewarding. The very act of reaching out to help or comfort another can trigger a small wave of pleasure, reinforcing the behavior and encouraging us to do it again. But chemical messengers are not the whole story. Hormonal states can amplify or dampen our empathic tendencies, sometimes in surprising ways. For example, vasopressin, another hormone closely related to oxytocin, has been shown to enhance empathy for social pain, possibly by activating similar neural and genetic pathways. In certain situations, hormonal changes linked to caregiving, such as those occurring in new parents, are accompanied by measurable increases in empathy and sensitivity to others' needs. Conversely, some hormones appear to work in the opposite direction. Testosterone, for instance, has been found to impair cognitive empathy. When testosterone levels are experimentally increased, people tend to have more difficulty accurately inferring others' thoughts and feelings. This effect is not limited to one gender and has been observed in both men and women under controlled conditions. The story grows more complex when we consider the influence of stress hormones. Cortisol, the body's main stress hormone, fluctuates in response to social situations, and research suggests that high stress can undermine empathic responses in some individuals. In certain psychiatric conditions, such as borderline personality disorder, dysregulation of stress hormones is linked to difficulties in empathy, underscoring the delicate hormonal balance required for healthy social functioning. While neurochemistry and hormones set the stage, our genetic makeup scripts key aspects of the performance. Scientists have found that empathy is partly heritable, passed down through the twists and turns of DNA. Twin studies and large-scale genetic analyses suggest that both emotional and cognitive empathy are influenced by our genes, although the environment plays a significant role as well. Specific genetic variations, sometimes called polymorphisms, have been linked to differences in empathic ability. For example, certain forms of the genes that govern the receptors for oxytocin and vasopressin are associated with higher or lower empathy, not just in individuals but even in romantic couples, where patterns of empathy can shape the dynamics of a relationship. It is not just oxytocin and vasopressin at work. Genes involved in the regulation of neurotransmitters like serotonin and hormones such as estrogen have also been implicated in empathy, adding layers of complexity to the genetic puzzle. The way we read others' emotions, our sensitivity to subtle facial cues or tone of voice, has been shown to have a genetic component as well. Genome-wide studies have even begun to uncover links between empathy-related genes and certain neuropsychiatric conditions. For instance, variations in genes associated with empathy are correlated with conditions like autism spectrum disorder, schizophrenia, and anorexia nervosa, providing crucial insight into why empathy can be diminished in these populations. Yet, it is important to emphasize that genes do not determine destiny. The environment, life experiences, and even cultural context interact with our genetic predispositions, shaping the final outcome. A child might inherit a genetic tendency toward high empathy, but if raised in a cold or neglectful environment, that potential may never fully bloom. Conversely, supportive and emotionally rich surroundings can nurture and expand whatever empathic capacity the genes provide. The biological mechanisms of empathy are not static. They can be shaped, tuned up or down by changes in neurochemistry and life circumstances. Empathic responses are also socially contagious. When we witness others being kind or understanding, our own empathic circuits can be activated, drawing us into the same current. This interplay between biology and social environment means that while some aspects of empathy are hardwired, others are remarkably flexible. Ultimately, the tapestry of empathy is woven from many threads. Neurotransmitters like oxytocin and dopamine, hormones such as vasopressin and testosterone, and a host of genes quietly influencing how we sense and respond to others. The result is a rich spectrum of empathic ability, with each person's biology setting the stage for their own unique way of connecting. The science reminds us that empathy is at once deeply personal and profoundly social, a phenomenon rooted in the chemistry of our bodies, shaped by the legacy of our genes, and responsive to the world in which we live. Empathy, in all its complexity, did not simply emerge as a uniquely human trait. Its roots reach deep into the animal kingdom, woven through the fabric of evolution itself. Charles Darwin, whose keen observations shaped our understanding of natural selection, noted that the seeds of empathy could be found in non-human animals. He observed that the ability to sense and respond to the distress of others was not exclusive to humans but had, in fact, arisen long before our species ever walked the earth. Modern research has built upon Darwin's insights, revealing that empathy's story is one of continuity, a shared thread connecting us to our closest relatives and even to the smallest mammals. Among mammals, empathy is far from rare. Rodents, for instance, display behaviors that suggest a basic form of empathic response. When one rat observes another in pain, it may freeze or show signs of distress itself, a phenomenon scientists call emotional contagion. This automatic resonance with another state is thought to be an evolutionary adaptation, enabling social species to respond quickly to danger and support group survival. In these moments, the boundary between self and other blurs, if only briefly, hinting at the ancient origins of our own empathic instincts. The story becomes even richer when we look to our ape cousins. Chimpanzees and bonobos, who share a common ancestor with humans, offer striking examples of empathy in action. Researchers have documented how these primates console companions who are distressed or injured, approaching them with gentle touches or embraces. These acts are not mere mimicry. They seem to reflect an understanding of another's suffering and a genuine motivation to provide comfort. Such behaviors suggest that the roots of empathy stretch back millions of years and that the capacity for emotional connection may have played a crucial role in the evolution of cooperation and morality. Evolutionary logic reinforces this perspective. In social species, the ability to share and respond to others' feelings fosters group cohesion and mutual aid. Empathy, in this context, is not a luxury but a necessity, an adaptation that helps individuals navigate complex social worlds. It is no coincidence that mammals who rely on prolonged caregiving and intricate social structures display some of the most sophisticated forms of empathic behavior. Evidence from comparative studies continues to grow, pointing to an unbroken line between the tender concern of a mother rat, the consoling embrace of a bonobo, and the compassion of a human being. From these ancient roots, empathy unfolds across the human lifespan in a remarkable developmental journey. Even in the earliest days of life, infants are sensitive to the emotions of those around them. Studies show that newborns will cry in response to the distress cries of other infants, a primitive form of emotional resonance. As babies grow, they begin to map the emotions of others more deliberately, mirroring facial expressions, responding to tone of voice, and, by the end of the first year, offering rudimentary comfort to distressed caregivers or peers. This early empathy is not yet reflective. It is rooted in automatic, bodily processes that link one person's emotional state to another's. The developmental path of empathy is shaped by a dynamic interplay of biology and experience. As children mature, their empathic abilities become more nuanced and intentional. Toddlers may try to soothe a crying friend, offering a favorite toy or a gentle touch. By preschool, children begin to understand that others can have feelings and perspectives different from their own, marking the emergence of perspective taking, the foundation of cognitive empathy. This gradual process is influenced by both genetic factors and the environment. Warm, responsive caregiving nurtures empathic tendencies, while neglect or harshness can blunt their development. Throughout childhood and adolescence, empathy continues to evolve. Social experiences, cultural context, and individual temperament all play a role in shaping how children learn to recognize, understand, and respond to the emotions of others. Not every child follows the same path. Some naturally display more empathic concern, while others struggle to tune in to the feelings of those around them. Importantly, research shows that empathy is not fixed. With guidance, practice, and supportive relationships, it can be fostered and strengthened throughout life. But what happens when empathy falters? The study of empathy's breakdown offers profound insights into both its biological foundations and its societal significance. Two conditions, in particular, illuminate the complexity of empathic processes: autism spectrum disorders and psychopathy. Though both are associated with empathy deficits, the nature of these impairments differs sharply. In autism spectrum disorders, the primary challenge often lies in cognitive empathy, the capacity to infer and understand the mental states of others. Individuals on the autism spectrum may have difficulty reading social cues or grasping what someone else is feeling or thinking. However, research complicates the traditional narrative, suggesting that emotional empathy, the immediate resonance with others' feelings, is often intact and, in some cases, heightened. This nuanced picture has led to the concept of the double empathy problem, which recognizes that communication difficulties are not one-sided, but arise from mismatches between autistic and non-autistic ways of experiencing the world. Psychopathy, by contrast, is marked by a striking deficit in affective empathy, the ability to share in another's emotional state. Individuals with psychopathic traits may understand what others feel on a cognitive level, but they do not experience the emotional resonance that would motivate concern or inhibit harm. This absence of emotional contagion can be traced, in part, to structural and functional differences in brain regions associated with empathy, such as the amygdala and other limbic structures. Unlike autism, psychopathy is also closely linked to antisocial behavior, including manipulation, deceit, and a lack of remorse. Comparative studies of these conditions reveal that empathy is not a single phenomenon, but a tapestry of distinct yet interconnected processes. Autism and psychopathy each highlight different vulnerabilities in this system, one affecting the understanding of others' minds, the other disrupting the feeling of their pain. Recent research even considers the rare co-occurrence of autism and psychopathy, though evidence suggests that while both involve empathy deficits, their social implications diverge sharply. The study of empathy in action across species throughout development and in its breakdown reminds us that our capacity for connection is both ancient and fragile. Empathy drives pro-social behavior, binds individuals into communities, and forges enduring social bonds. Yet its expression is shaped by biology, environment, and the unpredictable currents of individual experience. By tracing empathy's evolutionary roots, following its developmental arc, and understanding what happens when it falters, science brings us closer to grasping the full significance of this most human of capacities. The journey reveals not only how we come to feel with others, but also the delicate balance that sustains our shared humanity. Imagine sitting across from someone in distress. Perhaps a patient in a hospital, a friend navigating grief, or a stranger whose story flickers across your screen. The urge to reach out, to truly understand what another person is feeling, lies at the heart of empathy. As science continues to unravel the biological foundations of this capacity, a question emerges. Just how far can empathy be stretched? Are there limits set by our genes and neural circuitry, or can empathy be cultivated, expanded, even transformed through deliberate effort? Research shows that empathy is not just an ideal, but a genuine force for positive change. Studies reveal that individuals with higher empathy are more likely to engage in helpful, pro-social behaviors and to nurture healthier, more rewarding relationships. The evidence is strong enough that experts consider empathy a reliable predictor of positive behavior in groups ranging from classrooms to entire organizations. But the story does not end with measurement. The most intriguing findings concern empathy's malleability. Consider the growing body of research on empathy training. In healthcare, where the stakes are often highest, a meta-analysis has shown that structured empathy training can make a measurable difference. Healthcare professionals who receive specific training in empathic communication and understanding are better able to connect with patients, foster trust, and ultimately contribute to improved care outcomes. These benefits are not fleeting. Studies tracking clinicians over time find that the effects of empathy training can endure, shaping not only how they interact with patients, but also how they respond to colleagues and the broader demands of their profession. How, then, is empathy cultivated? Approaches vary, but two main categories emerge from the literature: experiential and humanistic training methods. Experiential methods immerse participants in role-play, simulated patient encounters, or carefully guided reflection on real-life scenarios. Humanistic approaches focus on developing a deeper sense of presence, active listening, and genuine curiosity about others' experiences. Both methods have demonstrated effectiveness, particularly in healthcare and caregiving. Recent research also highlights the promise of web-based empathy training, which can be effective for caregivers working outside traditional institutional settings. These online programs often combine video scenarios, self-reflection exercises, and feedback, making empathy training accessible to a wider audience. The question of biological limits, however, cannot be ignored. While empathy can be enhanced through practice and the right kind of environmental support, scientists caution against the idea of infinite plasticity. There are real biological constraints shaped by evolution, neural connectivity, and hormonal influences that set boundaries on how much empathy an individual can experience or express. For instance, certain patterns of neural wiring may make it harder for some people to feel or understand the emotions of others, regardless of training. These constraints do not make empathy training pointless, but they remind us that individual differences are real and sometimes resistant to change. Still, research also highlights the adaptability of the human brain. Advances in effective neuroscience provide insight into how empathy training may reshape neural circuits associated with understanding and sharing emotions. Mindfulness meditation emerges as a promising tool. Studies of clinicians who practice mindfulness show increases in self-reported empathy and compassion, as well as changes in biological markers linked to emotional regulation and pro-social behavior. Regular mindfulness practice appears to strengthen the neural pathways involved in attending to others' emotions while buffering against the exhaustion and emotional blunting that can come with constant caregiving. The long-term impact of empathy and communication training remains a subject of ongoing investigation. Early evidence suggests that when clinicians receive sustained training, the effects can persist for years, influencing both their professional satisfaction and patient outcomes. Embedding empathy into the very structure of healthcare through organizational culture, policies, and ongoing education may be just as important as individual training. When empathy is valued and modeled at every level, it becomes woven into daily practice, shaping not only individual encounters but the ethos of entire systems. Beyond clinical settings, the science of empathy is expanding in new directions. One innovative line of research introduces the concept of futures empathy. This idea extends the empathic imagination beyond present circumstances, asking individuals and groups to consider the perspectives, needs, and emotions of people in the future, those affected by today's decisions but not yet born, or those living in distant communities shaped by global trends. Futures empathy is still in its early stages, but it raises questions about moral responsibility and collective foresight. Can we train ourselves not only to stand in the shoes of others here and now, but also to sense the ripple effects of our choices across time and space? Compassion training, which overlaps with but is distinct from empathy training, has attracted growing interest as well. Although compassion involves motivation to act and alleviate suffering, the processes are closely linked. Studies suggest that compassion training can enhance both biological and prosocial behavior. Preliminary findings point to changes in brain function and markers of stress and immune response, suggesting interconnectedness of mind, body, and social life. What do these discoveries mean for society and for our relationships? On one hand, the biological roots of empathy remind us that this capacity is not merely a product of willpower or moral exhortation. There are limits, defined by our evolutionary history and neural makeup. On the other hand, the evidence that empathy can be cultivated through deliberate practice, organizational support, and cultural values offers hope for building more compassionate communities. The most effective interventions appear to honor both sides of this equation, respecting individual differences while providing opportunities for growth. For future scientific inquiry, the path ahead is rich with possibility. Researchers are now exploring not only how empathy develops and can be enhanced, but also how it intersects with technology, culture, and global challenges. As our world grows ever more complex and interconnected, the need for empathy rooted in biology yet open to transformation has never been more urgent. Whether in intimate relationships or on the world stage, our ability to cultivate empathy may shape the future in ways we are only beginning to imagine.